Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Overview and Scrutiny. We've got a very full agenda tonight, so I'll try and keep it moving promptly, but give certain time for discussion. But yeah, let's move on. Item 1. Apologies. Any apologies?
No apologies.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Item 1, minutes.
Is everybody happy with the minutes of the last meeting? Really?
Thank you. Thank you. Item 2, members' interests. Okay, excellent. Good start. Item 3, notice of executive decisions.
So with the notice of executive decisions, just to add that I did email around a draft of the next notice of key executive decisions. A couple of items have been added since this agenda was published, but will be on the next agenda, notably 4 items relating to the local plan. So we are aware of those at the moment, but unfortunately they weren't on the notice of key decisions that was published along with this agenda. But obviously it was just making you aware that they will be coming to the next meeting. Are there any other questions on the notice of decisions?
Yeah, thank you. I've actually this is sort of drawn my eye this morning. Actually, when I was having a look through earlier today, and I've checked back over the last. Well, I've gone back a year, just over a year actually, and tenancy strategy. It just sort of caught my eye earlier on, and sort of that's been there for quite some time. And I've looked back, and that's been bounced along quite a few times now. I just sort of didn't know if there's a particular reason for that.
I can certainly ask that of the officers and let you know a response on that one.
Thank you. Item 4, so budget.
Good evening, Chair and panel. It's very nice to see you this evening. You'll notice that I'm not Councillor Mickelberg, so you'll forgive us. We are covering for absence. We are a tad heavy-handed because that's what it takes apparently to cover for when you are missing your lead in finance. Councillor Mickelberg, if you're watching, I'm hoping you're raising a smile at that. We're going to present 3 financial items this evening. This is the first. I'm very pleased to be accompanied by Karen Sutton, who has worked her socks off along with her very capable team to bring us probably one of our cleanest budgets, in the sense that we've needed to scrutinise every single line because we have a new administration, but importantly we also have a new 151 officer, and that's a real benefit to us as a council because it allows us to go through to test every assumption and to really look at that budget in a level of detail that probably we haven't typically, because people have been here and known what's in every line. So I think that's a really strong place to find ourselves tonight. Tonight is obviously, if you like, a technical scrutiny of the budget, and I'm sure that when we get to full council on the 22nd, that's where we'll have a much more wide-ranging debate. But we're going to do our best to be Councillor Mickelberg in his absence, but I'm going to hand across to Karen, if that's okay.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. So I'm here presenting the proposed budget for next year and the MTFS for the following 4 years. This is both a statutory requirement and a critical element of the Council's governance and demonstration of financial control. There are a number of key points to highlight. We are presenting a break-even budget for 23-24. This is a significant improvement on last year's medium-term financial strategy, where a deficit of £2.5 million was forecast. This improvement has been achieved through there's no rebaselining of an NDR that was forecast in last year's MTFS, and it has been deferred, we believe, to 25-26. But as a result of the no rebaselining, we've retained 3.8 million of income. In the December budget, the government announced increased funding for local government, and this was confirmed in the local government funding settlement, which we received just before Christmas. This gave us a further 1.1 million, meeting the guaranteed 3% funding promise. The new homes bonus, not expected to be paid in 23-24, has been confirmed as receivable next year. This is 1.3 million further income. So in total, our funding has increased by 6.2 million. Net expenditure-wise, we've been saying all year it's a tough year. The economic climate, as well as affecting our residents, has affected us as well. And we've seen energy and wage inflation increasing, as well as unavoidable pressures from temporary accommodation costs, and our audit fees will be going up. We have reviewed all our costs across all services, including removing unapproved vacancies, and including increases in income where we have generated further income, for example, renting out the Pathfinder House offices. Our review of costs generated a 6.3 million reduction in net expenditure, but the increased costs, which I mentioned, have pushed our costs up by 9.7 million. So of the additional income we got, we have unfortunately had to use a fair chunk of it. The increased costs include provision to pay staff a 4% cost of living increase next year. That's double the allowance we had originally in last year's MTFS. So despite our best efforts, net expenditure has increased by 3.4 million. The budget is not risk-free, but it is our best estimate of the cost of delivering services in the next year and income that can be generated from our activities. Rolling forward to the medium-term financial strategy, we continue to have considerable uncertainty as the local government funding settlement is only a single-year deal. Assumptions we have made for the following 4 years are: NNDR rebaselining will not occur until 25-26, meaning we continue to retain a greater share of this revenue in 24-25. There are indications that new homes bonus will also be paid in 24-25, and we have included this. As I've mentioned, rebasing of NNDR will occur in 25-26 with significant impacts to our funding. We estimate our funding will drop from 12 million to 7.3 million as a result of this. We have assumed in the MTFS that the decrease will be balanced by the payment of declining damping adjustments. Across all years, the latter 3 years of the MTFS, we have included 8.3 million of damping adjustments. We believe these payments are likely, but they are high risk. This does put a considerable amount of jeopardy in our MTFS. But as I said, it is our best estimate and of what we believe will be the likely outcome. Given this uncertainty, the Council needs to take measures to improve its financial sustainability and reduce its reliance on government and council tax funding. We have already taken measures to do this. The commercial investment strategy is very successful and contributes to the revenue budget. The MTFS assumes charging for some non-statutory services will be introduced from 24-25, and this will further subsidise the revenue budget. In summary, we are proposing a medium-term financial strategy that delivers a contribution to reserves of 4.7 million across the 5 years. This is an improvement on the MTFS presented this time last year, which proposed a transfer of reserves of 8.3 million. The MTFS obviously covers capital as well as revenue. Our capital forecasts have been reviewed and aligned with known plans and timings. Some investment monies, most notably Future High Streets and the Market Town programme, have been rephased to next year's budget in line with delivery plans. There are no major investments included in the MTFS which would require external borrowings due to the high rates of borrowing at the moment and the economic uncertainty at this time. Recognising the benefits being brought by the commercial investment strategy and the fact that we're not further developing that in the coming year, a review and update of the strategy is planned during 23-24 to reflect changes in the economic environment since the strategy was created. I believe the current strategy was implemented in 2016, and I think we'll all agree that the world has moved on a bit since then. Thank you. that's the MTFS that we are presenting to committee.
Very comprehensive, and I'm sure it's excellent. Thank you. I'll open it to the floor for comments. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say thank you to the officers because the budget and the MTFS, is in a very, very different position to when I was elected back in May. So I'm really, really pleased to see that we're definitely moving in the right direction. So thank you, and please pass that on to all officers involved. I've got a few technical questions looking at items, and the first thing that I've picked out is a big increase in the Chief Planning Officer budget. It's gone up from 441,000 up to 967,000, and then it will come back down again in the following year. Can I ask why that's been such a big increase, please?
You're correct. There is a significant increase, and we do have a gross bid in for that area in the first year of the MTFS. We recognise that that area has a backlog at the moment and needs to invest in clearing that backlog and delivering services on a more timely basis. So we have put in expenditure in there, both to look at the current staffing structure and see whether staff are being appropriately rewarded to retain those staff, and also we've put in some backlog busting measures to clear the backlog.
Yes,
Yeah, Karen's absolutely correct. The number of bids, as you've probably seen, to try and basically improve our position. There is a huge increase in, a large increase in expenditure, I should say, looking to improve salaries, resource growth, job retention initiatives, etc. We only started in the spring actually monitoring using the data to track our performance. And we are, I think, getting there to a large extent, but there's still a long way to go on it. So the next year we'll be making that investment to try and improve that situation. We do have a lot of income generation going on. I hope that's going to be reflected. Look at the pre-application service, for example. We're going to get income from Alconbury Weald Priority Planning Service, also from Wintringham Park as well.
Any other questions? Sorry. Any other questions? Councillor Corney.
I just want to ask Councillor Sanderson. So I'm just looking at these numbers, and maybe I'm getting it wrong. Fees and charges, your budget is less than this year, but you've just said you're going to increase the income. Or am I reading this wrong, Tom?
No, that's going to be our aim. We had a delay in the pre-app service, which has affected some of our income projections. I think the basic problem with planning is it's recruiting and retaining staff, and that's what we've really struggled with. And we need to improve that. I think we're doing that with Clara and Julie. And as you said earlier, we'll be presenting our local plan again, an update on that next month. So I think things are moving in the right direction, but I'm under no illusions that we have a big challenge.
Thank you. So, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Table 2 on page 23. Can you just tell me what the damping adjustment is, please? I'm not sure I understand what that is.
So the damping adjustment is the phasing in, it's linked to the rebaselining of the NNDR. So I said our income drops from 12 million down to 7 million as a result of the rebaselining. And then the damping adjustments come in. These are the figures which we believe are our highest risk. These are smoothing the impact of that rebaselining adjustment.
Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at table 4B on the community and health line, the figure for 23-24 is 278,000, which is lower than the current year forecast and also lower than subsequent years. I wonder if you could just explain that apparent dip. Thank you.
Don't automatically have an answer for that one, so can I take that away as a point, and I'll come back to you.
Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Chair. In council recently, we agreed an important set of principles that we would use to drive the setting of the budget, and I'm just wondering if you could comment on how those principles have actually influenced the budget that we've set.
Thank you, Councillor Pickering. Well, those budget principles have underpinned the thinking, which is why we did them. But if I just remind you, I thought I might get asked that this evening, so I've actually got them on the screen in front of me, just as a reminder. So as a council, we agreed that we would seek to protect frontline services, and that's what this budget focuses on. It's not making cuts to frontline services. That's what we are trying to make sure we protect and maintain throughout this current budget and then throughout the MTFS. We said that we would enact changes that required avoiding using the reserves, and you'll see in the MTFS that we do not intend to be in that position. So that's a positive place for us to be. And that will make us potentially unusual, particularly in the budget, because I understand that many other councils at this point in the budget process, as they go through that, are in that position. So that's a very positive place for council to find itself. We said we would need to balance the fees and charges and the commercial revenues with the demands of our services, and we are doing that. We said we would maximise innovation, and I think one of the really important things, had Councillor Mickelberg been here, you would have heard him use a phrase that he's used lots of times as we've been going through the thinking behind the process, and about that the budget doesn't limit your imagination. There are lots of things that we know officers have been thinking around in terms of how we might innovate and use some of the technologies which are coming on stream that would allow us potentially to deliver some of our services a little differently, and that we would make better impact on those frontline services, but we also might make some savings. So we've actually got a line within the budget that allows us to do some innovation work, which is linked to the efficiencies. So this is about working a little differently to try and work out how we move and we innovate to work smarter. And that will also then allow us potentially to reinvest any of those savings. The commercial property, we've said as a council that we would pause that. That doesn't mean we won't continue to invest. It just means now's not really a great time to be doing that. But what it does mean is that we can keep all of those investment opportunities under review. And I know that something Councillor Gray and I have talked about outside of this meeting is at the point at which we're ready to do that, and we've made those decisions as council, we can then look at getting the right expertise in to support and give us that professional advice. And then we said that we would be very careful and very minded of the things that our communities told us. And I know that that's been close to some of your hearts, that making sure that we listen to our residents. The survey certainly told us that of those who contributed, that frontline services really mattered. But also it wasn't just the statutory ones, quite a lot of the non-statutory were up there as being very important. So we've tried to be mindful of all of those things. But we don't equally have a money tree. So we're trying to balance the aspirations that we have as council, the things that we know we will want to do, with protecting the things that actually really matter day to day to our residents. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Councillor Cornby. Any other questions on this? No? Oh, Councillor Gray.
Thank you very much, Chair. And just a few, I'm going to restrict my comments. I'll do my best to restrict my comments. So a few things that, given that this is supposed to be a scrutiny panel and we're supposed to be giving you some things to think about as a cabinet on reflection. So you're quite right, this is not a debate on the budget. So, I mean, I have to say, I've seen a lot of these over my time, and this is one of the more remarkable documents I think I've ever witnessed. And I think the majority of people sitting around this table are new councillors. And if we could go to Appendix 1, which is where all my comments are based, or questions, and page 37, which contains a slide, table 28. I think it sort of demonstrates admirably the sort of annus mirabilis of government funding that seems to exist, because the change from this time last year, when the executive leader chastised me, I think, in the budget meeting about deficits and what have you, to see a 75% increase in 1 year is quite remarkable. And I think it's good news for our residents. So putting everything aside, I think it's very good news for the residents. It gives this authority a lot of flexibility around how and what it chooses to spend its money on. If we could turn to table 5, which is much higher up. I can't remember the page at the moment. So I guess that if I was talking to the Cabinet and if the Cabinet were listening to me, I guess the challenge that I would put into the mix would be around those net expenditure numbers that sit in there, and how realistic you think they are. And I know you've tested everything, and I know that there's been a lot of hard work going on in the background. And Karen, you've done an excellent job, I think, of mentioning the sensitivities and the risks that sit out there. But I do think that it's something that we will need to be quite careful in reflecting on, I think, in terms of, do we really think that we're going to be able to drive net expenditure from 24 million down to 21.5 million? We still know we have some inflation sitting in the background. We're obviously hoping that's coming down, but it's clearly going to work its way through the system. Inevitably, excuse me, I think inevitably when there's money around, there's work to be done, and there's ambition, and you will no doubt articulate that more clearly at the full council meeting, which would suggest that people are required to do that. And if I was to turn to the very useful it's table 7, which is basically where everything kind of gets brought together on a gross basis, and you kind of see it all pushed together and then goes from gross to net. It's a very handy table to look at. When I look at that, and I guess I'm looking at you, Karen, here. The line for salary there, that would suggest that either we're not going to be increasing salaries very much, or we're going to have fewer staff, or there's going to be a lot of churn inside there because there's agency staff that's being used, and there's all sorts of things happening in there. But I guess I would ask the Cabinet to reflect on, if you think you're going to be spending nearly 21 million on employees next year, do you think in 27-28 you're still going to be spending 21 million on employees in 5 years from now? Because that feels to me instinctively ambitious when I look at that. If I was to turn to capital, because we often forget about capital, we get very focused on revenue, but there's quite a story behind the capital budget, which I think will continue to develop, because clearly I know the new administration has sort of ambitions for things that they want to do. I guess this is table 26A on page 27. Karen, there's a big line in there for Huntingdon redevelopment. Has that? I'm assuming that's now been taken out for the year ahead.
Yes, it has. Yeah, that was developed some years back before COVID, and those plans need to be reviewed, so therefore it's not appropriate to keep it in our forecast.
And again, Chair, through you, I mean, that doesn't surprise me, by the way, and I don't sort of have any contention about that. But I suppose when you go to the bottom of that table then, and you look at the positions, the total positions which sit on page 29, at the top part of page 29, if you were to take the 16 million off the 23 that we started out with, What we're really saying is that there are about 7 million pounds worth of kind of capital projects kind of bubbling around in the background. That's now risen to nearly 30 million. So that's good news. There's a lot more things happening, but things happening mean people need to deliver those things, and there's activity sitting behind it. And whilst I accept that a lot of the people costs can be capitalised, again, I think there's a danger sitting behind there around stretch, pace, and the ability of this council to get over the line 30 million pounds worth of projects when it only had 7 a year ago. So I think, again, just something to reflect on at that point. My final point, you'll be pleased to know, again, another item we forget about, fees and charges, Appendix 2. I think with some justification, there was a degree of challenge that the fees and charges hadn't been uprated in line with inflation, and consequently we'd fallen behind. We'll probably come on to this discussion later on in the meeting. But when I look through there, there's an awful lot of zeros in there. So it doesn't quite match up with the rhetoric that was being preached at me a couple of meetings ago around, we've got to keep pace with this. I know it's outside of your control, but it was ironic, I thought, in the extreme, and probably something you might want to reflect on as given the composition of the coalition that you're leading, Sarah, is that Cambridge City are putting up their building control charges by, reasonable amounts, including on things like heat pumps and thermal savings, which I thought was a height of irony, given that we're supposed to be trying to drive improvements in that particular area. So again, I think things like fees and charges, given it's such a big line in the budget, and we have given focus, it looks to me as though some more work could be done, probably not for this budget, but in the year ahead, looking at some of the numbers there. So I hope, Chair, that you feel that they are helpful, constructive comments that you might like to reflect on in the week that's available to you before the Cabinet meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank Councillor Conway.
If I may, Chair, through you, Councillor Gray, thank you very much. I have taken copious notes. I know we're on record, but I've taken copious notes, and I think that they're really helpful and they are really positive and constructive comments and very much welcome. Thank you. I think there is much more we will want to do, and I think the real challenge is, we're a new administration. We are at a beginning of a journey, and I think the answer is, like you, we are also in, we recognise we're in times of flux. So the answer is we're watching very closely to see what everybody else is doing, but there will be, I think, lots of opportunity to do more and better and different as the world around us is also shifting. And I think the real challenge is staying ahead and being competitive where we should be, but also being minded of the fact that there are probably things we have yet to be able to forecast, bearing in mind that the last couple of years have been full of lots of surprises that none of us expected. I remember those conversations in council, and so I'm also minded that we could have some curved balls we have yet to know about, but thank you, very much appreciated. And can I also say, Chair, if I may, through you, we also really appreciated the opportunity to work with our shadow portfolio holder, Councillor Jennings. I think that's something that we've really welcomed, and I look forward to that continuing throughout the administration. It's hugely beneficial.
Thank you. Thank you. I have to say, I thought it was a very well put together paper, and I'm very delighted that we've been able to offer staff a reasonable increase as well. So thank you for that. Are there any more questions before we actually move on? Okay, excellent. So move on to the next item. Thank you. Apologies, yes. Here we go. Can I have a show of hands to say that we're all in favour of recommending the current paper to go forward? With comments. Of course.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that Sarah has mentioned. I think you made some very, very well and welcome comments. So they would actually be part of the part of it as well. Thank you.
Just to clarify for Councillor Gray, obviously all of the comments that have been made on this item will be then, I will then condense those and add those to the Cabinet report as a supplement, which the Cabinet members will get prior to their meeting next week.
Okay. Moving on to the next item, item 5, Treasury Management.
So, Chair, if it's okay, I'm going to invite Oliver to kick us off on this, and then we will support as we may be needed.
Evening. What I'm bringing to you tonight is the Treasury Management Strategy and its associated strategies. I think there's about 5. And we'll be using that in the coming year for our Treasury investment, and we'll be using it for monitoring our capital expenditure and borrowing and investing. There's 3 items that I'd like to point out within it which are new this year. So we've got a liability benchmark, which is a graph which is included this year, and that's showing us that we've got no need to borrow within the term of this graph, so that's a good thing. The borrowing is the jagged line, that's the current borrowing that we've got, and the diagonal line is where we need to be. So, and the liability benchmark is there, so the gap between that jagged line and the liability benchmark is our investing at the moment. So there's no need for us to borrow. We're a net investor. And we're also looking at a position where we're meeting the prudential code in that we're not exceeding our CFR with our borrowing. So that's all looking pretty good, and that's been summarised in a graph this year for the first time. I've also included in section 6.3 of the Treasury Management Strategy the environmental, society and governance factors. That's also something that we're looking at this year or next year when we're investing. It's something that's new in the market, and we'll be looking to take on new investments that fulfill those factors. And finally, in section 6.5, where we've got listed our counterparty limits, I've actually taken the opportunity to reduce some of those because the market is maybe not what it should be. There may be some bad debts within the market. So what I've looked at is reducing the limits where we've got single counterparties. So say a single bank or a single council. And so we'll be looking to invest our money in money market funds, which have got multiple counterparties, and DMO mainly. So I've left those limits the same. So those are the new items, and that's my summary. Thank you.
Okay, again. Thank you for that. There was just a question that I noticed myself. One of the risks factors that you'd actually put in was actually the experienced staff. That obviously you've got fairly specialist staff dealing with this investment. So obviously, and I noticed that you've actually put that as a risk. What are we doing to actually mitigate that?
That's good. We've got 2 very experienced officers in the finance manager and the section 151. There's me as well. And we've also got a finance business partner who's worked a lot with the CIS programme, and he's quite keen on learning in this area, but we do recognise it's quite a specialist area. So I expect we'll be training him up more as we go along. So we'll be looking to train him up on the new programme as well. So I don't think we've got any concerns about that at the moment, but we do recognise that it's not something that everyone understands. And I suppose additionally, we should look at our documents that we've got, and they're a good explanation for someone who doesn't fully understand that area of expertise.
Quite. Are there any other questions on this? Oh, Councillor Gray.
Just a quick one. Oliver, appreciate the comment you made about counterparties. Has there been any time in the last 12 months where you've been concerned about any of our counterparties and had to move quickly?
There you go. We know that we had a problem with Thurrock, but we did eventually get the money back. So I think I wasn't too concerned about that because I felt fairly certain that we would get it back eventually. But no, we haven't, because I think we've got a lot of cash at the moment. We've got probably about 60 million at the moment, and I would say around half of that I keep with the DMO. So the government in theory is risk free, hopefully. So that's fairly safe, and we've got, I'm not sure, 6 or 7 money market funds now. So what I normally do would spread it across those 6 or 7, so, and they're then spread across others. So that's a long answer to your question, but we haven't had any incidents in the last year where we've needed to move our money. And again, most of it's kept short. So the DMO is a fixed date. Money market funds are available on the day, so it's easy to get it back. Yeah.
Let's try this one. Are there any other questions on that? Councillor Pickering.
Thank you. Oliver, you touched on the ESG scoring, and I appreciate it's somewhat early days for that, but obviously we have environment and climate change sort of central to our agenda as as a council, and so I'm just wondering if you can comment on how consistent you think our investment portfolio is, with those aims currently, and what changes we might be thinking about making as we go forward.
I think the problem we've got at the moment is the market is new in ESG. So in order to spread our investments around, we're still using products which I suppose in theory aren't meeting the highest standard of ESG, but we'll be looking to develop that over the period that the market develops. I think that's probably the best we can do at the moment. But I've got a training course coming up soon, so I'll be able to find out a bit more about it. But I think the intention is to have a kind of scoring mechanism which will help us to choose between investments. But at this stage, I think the comment in my report was that it's fairly early and the scoring hasn't really sort of developed yet. So, but I'll certainly, that's something we'll be looking at, and we've also got one money market fund at the moment, which is an ESG based money market fund. So that was a new product to the market. So I expect that will be something that will, once that's an HSB product. So now that's started, I expect there'll be some others coming along. But I wouldn't like to comment any further at the moment because I'm not really sure how the market's going to develop. What I'll do is that when we've got an outturn report at the end of the year, so I think I'll try and include a bit more information in at that point if we know any more then.
Thank you, Oliver. Are there any other questions on the report or any comments? Okay. Can I actually move to a show of hands, actually effectively putting forward the report? Thank you, please. Great. Okay. Doing well. Item 6, finance performance.
So, Chair, I'm actually going to ask Karen to start us off on this, and then I've got some extra things that I would like to say as part of the report.
Thank you. It's very much a finance show tonight. I need to point out we have picked up a minor typo in the report, and I apologise for this. In section 3.1, the revenue section refers to an underspend. It should read an overspend. Apologies for that. So I'm presenting the Q3 financial forecast for the current year. The trend of the Q3 forecast is generally consistent with what we reported through the Q2 forecast. Overspends continue due to increased energy costs, higher staff costs in one measure and planning, increased temporary accommodation costs where rent costs have increased but subsidy remains static. There is a significant change relating to financial interest receivable though. When we presented the Q2 forecast review, we said that interest rates receivable were increasing and we would review the forecast interest receivable calculations in this review. We have done this taking into account the lower capital expenditure forecast and also the settlement of the People for Places loan. When we presented the Q2 forecast, the People for Places loan was straddling that reporting time. So we mentioned that it had been settled, but not that we'd paid the money back to Public Works Loan Board at that point, nor have we got the final settlement for it. Since we presented our Q2 forecast, interest rates have continued to increase. Where we were receiving an average of 0.08%, we are now receiving 1.76%. Whilst these figures do sound low, on our average bank balance, Oliver has just mentioned, is around £60 million, that would generate approximately an extra £950,000 per annum. Taking into account those rates, and the upside, the settlement upside on the People for Places loan settlement. Due to a quirk in the bonds market at that time, we ended up with a settlement benefit from Public Works Loan Board rather than having to pay a penalty. This benefit was shared with People for Places because that was part of the loan agreement, but we did get an extra £250,000 as a result of that repayment. However, taking that into account and also our increased interest rates, our forecast interest receivable has increased by £1 million. We haven't released the full amount of this into the forecast, so I don't want to steal Sarah's thunder. She will give, but we have put a provision into the accounts with a review to doing something around staff reward. I must mention that this windfall cannot be regarded as sustainable. The financial markets at the moment remain lively, and we do not count on interest rates receivable continuing at such a high level. So this is a one-off windfall we are counting at the moment. In summary, we're reporting a year-end forecast outcome which is £55,000 overspent against budget. Given the year that we've had with the economic uncertainty, the war in the Ukraine, which wasn't known at the time this budget was presented last year, and the impacts that's had on fuel inflation, energy restrictions, and price increases, and general inflation, I'm quite pleased with that outcome. It's certainly an improvement on the Q2 forecast outcome where we were predicting an overspend of 400,000. Turning to capital, we have reduced the capital expenditure forecast for the year to reflect activities which will only be delivered in year. The forecast spend is now 10.4 million, considerably lower than the adjusted budget of 42 million. This is due to rephasing some spend into next year, notably the Market Towns programme, Future High Streets, which is 11.5 million, and 2.8 million for Hinchinbrook Country Park, and the removal of projects originally defined pre-COVID, but the plans have not progressed. For example, the Huntingdon redevelopment mentioned by Councillor Gray before. That's my summary of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah.
Thank you. The microphone's now working. And then I wanted to add then my addition to the report before we then move to questions and comments. So given that you've heard that we are in a position we didn't anticipate ourselves to be in, given that I know there was always an intention to recognise and reward the hard-working staff that enable HDC to deliver everything it aspires to deliver for its residents, I find myself in a very privileged position tonight because I would like to let you know that we will be making a one-off non-consolidated payment to every member of HDC's staff of £1,000. That doesn't stop us continuing to have our discussion with our workforce about their ambitions and aspirations to see further recognition. And you'll know that the budget already has a 2+2 staff pay increase envisaged within it. But we felt that it was really important. We know people are struggling under a cost of living. We know our staff are hugely committed to working incredibly hard. Many of those savings are down to the hard work of our teams. And we felt this was an appropriate moment in which we were able, very fortunately, to make some contribution and by some way of saying thank you and please help us continue to achieve those ambitions. So I hope that will be well received, but I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Speaking personally on this, I'm quite delighted. So I very much actually support staff, so I think it's great. But personal view, any questions on that? Councillor Blackwell.
Yes, obviously I endorse that, the same comments. It's great news. I assume that it will be paid in the next available pay run, i.e. February? March.
Sorry, we're having problems with technology and microphones. It's just been confirmed it will be paid in March. So it will be paid within this financial year, and I hope that that will go some way to easing some of the burdens as people have coped with some of those unexpected extra costs.
Okay, so excellent. That's great news, and obviously will be hugely welcomed. But obviously, just adding on to that, we want to attract and retain our existing staff, and I just wanted to sort of elaborate on what we factored in sort of ongoing to try and sort of keep those people and recruit new people that we believe we need.
So we've already, within the budget, as you know, we've got the notion that we're providing, you've made a recommendation tonight for the budget to go through to Cabinet and come to full council. There is the 2+2, which we're really pleased to be in a position. We'd like to have done more, but we are trying to do as much as we can within the ability that we have, the pot of money that we have. But I know that one of the conversations that we have had with the Managing Director, Jo Lancaster, and her successor, Oliver Morley, who's going to be our interim director, one of the conversations we've been having along with our employee representatives is about what we can do that's not just in salary, to recognise the achievements of staff. And some of you who might be able to see in the room, and it's probably still on camera, the sparkly wall behind me is not for us as councillors. It is because we celebrated in this room last week the eye-care values and the hard work of our staff, and them recognising each other's achievements. There are lots of things I think we will want to do to continue to celebrate and recognise those achievements, but some rewards are not always purely financial. There are probably lots of other things we might do, and some of the staff are already making some suggestions which are incredibly welcome. So we'll continue to work with everybody to try and look at other ways in which we can recognise the work of the staff and also reward that hard work. We really want to retain our staff.
Thank you. Good news. Just sorry, apologies for reverting to the one-off payment. Is that news being passed out to the staff? Has that they've been made aware?
Sorry. Anybody watching the live stream will now be busy saying, have you heard? I'm pleased there are some officers in the room who also have big smiley faces, and the managing director is indicating. Joe?
So no, staff don't know about this. They're going to be briefed tomorrow morning. So we've pre-briefed the employee reps group and the trade unions. I sent an email out about 5:30 this evening. So it is not known publicly. And the emails are ready to send tomorrow once it was confirmed this evening. And just to be clear, so it's all permanent staff. So it doesn't relate to contractors, doesn't relate to temporary staff, doesn't relate to variable contractors either, variable hours people. Thank you, Chairman.
Excellent news. Are there any other comments, observations? Councillor Gray?
I'm always trying to look around and see whether anybody else is, but thank you for guiding me, Chair. Just Appendix 1, if we can, just as we are here to discuss and scrutinise performance, on page 3, and this is definitely in your area, Karen, We make the statement higher interest rates on cash holdings plus lower interest on the PWLB loan due to early repayment, which is presumably explaining the underspend. But the PWLB loan was for places for people. So actually we were making a margin on that. So the early repayment of that is a negative to us. It's not a positive to us, albeit that obviously we're not making that payment. They're not now making us a payment. So I'm not sure that statement totally, I think it's just not quite right, if I might be so bold as to venture that.
Pass. Yeah, I did look at this. It's the way the loans are worked out because they're annuities. We would make more money in the later years, so we weren't making a lot of money early on. But if we'd have kept that loan going, we'd have been making a bit more. So we are actually making a saving because it's gone from the early years. Yeah, it's strange but true.
Now that you've explained to me it's an annuity repayment loan, I can understand that. So I apologise. Thank you for answering that question. Page 12, we make a comment, Chair, there regarding, I'm just trying to find it, the head of operations, too much was accrued in relation to the High Street Fund, the second to last item there. So when we received reimbursement from central government, it didn't cover those costs. They're one-off costs, so it's not expected to impact future years. I suppose this is just like a little flashing amber light in comparison to the comments that I made earlier about capital, because clearly here we thought, oh, we could reclaim this money, it's all capitalised, and then we discovered that we couldn't. And so again, it's mission creep. Well, it's not really mission creep, but you know what I mean. So I think again, there's just a cautionary tale there around, you know, we are going to be spending a lot of other people's money, and we just got to be really careful that we're making sure that we know who's paying for all this and who's paying for the staff, because in this instance, clearly that calculation had gone awry. Is that a fair observation?
Thank you. It is a fair observation. It's also an observation that we are doing more due diligence on the figures. We are increasing the financial scrutiny of them, and the fact that we've uncovered something like this and reported it and corrected it is a sign of actually. You know, I have to thank Sharon Russell Surtees, who's our deputy Section 151 and Chief Finance Officer, because she's doing considerable amounts of work on the accounts and encouraging her staff to produce the appropriate reconciliations and like. So we've already done a considerable amount of work for the year end and scrutinising these costs.
Thank you, Karen.
And then a final observation, which kind of straddles several pages here. So it starts on page 21 with, these are all kind of place, one leisure, operational delivery issues. Again, I just want to reinforce the point, there's an awful lot of stuff churning through here. A lot of it appears to be kind of new, which is fine, great. We've got some new stuff to spend. But again, I think question marks we need to be raising of ourselves, and we'll come on to performance in a minute, is around the delivery of these projects. And I'm sorry to keep harping on about it, Chair, but you know, in our last meeting that we had here, Councillor Wakeford was very kindly here, along with Pam Scott, and we had, you know, some fairly clear discussions around the ability of us to be able to get these things over the line. And I think they're sitting there in front of us as a scrutiny panel. It would be remiss not to point out that there's new stuff creeping on here, and are we set up to really deliver that? I'll leave that challenge, if I may, there, Chair.
I'm sure that will come up at a later point, actually, but fair point. Other, oh, Councillor Corney.
Thank you, Chair. I'm on page, page 15, which is the explanation of leisure. Just a few questions on some of the comments that were made there. We've got, it says under impressions, direct debit income, which is down to 268,000. Can someone explain what that means? Does that mean we've lost these direct debits? People have cancelled direct debits, or is it a problem in our systems? Because it says the key action is to improve this through the implementation of new sales management system. So I just want to understand what that means. There's a few questions here, so maybe one at a time, if you want.
Okay, so I believe this relates to income which is lower than we expected, as opposed to, no, it's not income that we've lost. And by implementing a new sales management system and processes, it should enable us to promote this more.
Okay, so if I understand it, so we've lost 168,000 from direct debits because people have cancelled or changed their direct debit arrangements, and we're going to market them, is what you're saying. Fitness activities, a lot of that around the dry. It was the training shed that intrigued me. So at 135, 136,000 pounds, this is all for membership revenues based upon very aggressive targets. Fair enough. Third-party contractor training shed will conclude their contract as of, I think it's March 22. So that's a year ago, more. And One Leisure Facilities will take this back in-house. You may be the wrong person to ask at this stage, and I'm thinking maybe I should have left this one till later, but it's on this report. What gives us confidence that we can run a service that an external contractor seems to have failed to run, and obviously avoid the £136,000 sort of loss or drop in income?
I'm not sure Karen can answer that, but
Okay. So just going back to the training shed, you're correct. The contract for the training shed ends on the 31st of March. That may be a typo, 2023. So we were paying the management company a management fee every month. So if we look at the pure finances from a profit and loss point of view, the training shed was losing about £3,500 a month. So effectively, we don't pay the management fee from April onwards this year. So we're fairly confident from a profit and loss point of view that the business can be sustainable. And the message within that commentary is around that we already have a very robust and very good staff team through our impressions team. And we strongly believe with the incumbent staff there who are on our T's and C's that we can deliver a better service than has previously been operated under the training shed banner.
are you happy with that? That's fine. Okay. Are there any other questions? Oh, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. So if you look on page 202 or page 12, under street cleansing, it says deletion of 3 posts. Is that because we haven't been able to fill them and we've decided we're not going to, or is that 3 redundancies?
Yeah, I'm there. That is 3 vacancies which hadn't been filled and are no longer required. So we've removed those from the forecast this year.
Any other questions? Okay. Are we finished on that item? Okay. Right. Can I? Obviously, there are a few comments on that, but can we have a show of hands that we're quite happy for this to go to cabinet? Yes. Thank you. Gentlemen, ladies, thank you. Okay. Excellent. Oh God. Can we go on to the next item, which is corporate performance report?
I've been here all afternoon, so I should know. Thank you very much, Chair. It's my great pleasure to once again present the corporate performance report. This is the fourth of these I've presented, and you start to get a slight feeling of deja vu because it's largely the same as the last one we presented. Some of the greens have become ambers, and some of the ambers have become green. So I'm going to try and take you through the things which seem particularly concerning to me, and then you can let me know what you think is concerning. So the first of the greens that's become amber is KA1, which was declare a climate emergency. Following the comments of this panel at the last meeting, you rightly pointed out that we hadn't declared a climate emergency, so I asked for this to be switched to amber. But then subsequently at the cabinet meeting last week, we adopted a climate strategy which formally recognised a climate and ecological emergency. So we should have a discussion of whether that should be marked green or not. More importantly, I think KA19 is delivery of affordable homes in Warboys. Here we're at the mercy of the planners. We've received revised designs for the houses, and those are due to be considered by DMC in April. Moving on to corporate indicators, which there are 15 greens, 6 ambers and 3 reds. So I'm going to start off by talking about the reds. PL1 is a lower than expected rate of household waste recycling, which is a consequence of, seems a long time ago now, but the dry summer we had, which means we didn't have very much green material. This is a county-wide and country-wide issue. The same thing came up at County Council. And actually, it's probably beneficial for us because our composting facility is out of action at the household recycling centre in Waterbeach, so we couldn't deal with it anyway, and we have to ship it elsewhere. PL20 looks really concerning and should be a cause of concern, which is we've got a lower than expected number of homelessness preventions. But I'd argue that's actually a good thing. It means that demand is lower. We have fewer number of people presenting. We've got a lower number of people than expected in temporary accommodation. And it demonstrates that we're being successful in addressing these issues upstream of kind of the crisis stage as well. So I think it's down to good work by that team. And PL26 is one that keeps coming back to us. So we expected to have 20 community and voluntary sector groups accredited under the Good to Go scheme. I think we've done 3 so far. There's a couple more in the pipeline, but there's no way we're going to get towards 20 at the end of the year. Had a long talk with Claudia Deeth this afternoon about this. And I think the issue is, well, there's no demand from the voluntary sectors. I think they're not recognising the benefit of this compared with the work involved. And I think that if you sign up for a community group, you do so because you want to help people and not fill in lots of paperwork. So at the moment, I think that's something that we need to reconsider because it's not really working out. Slightly concerned about the number of active customer portal accounts, which has declined slightly this month. We're trying to force people, or trying to encourage people to use the portal, and so we should take that very seriously. And PL13 is also very concerning. So the average number of days to process new claims for housing benefit and council tax support has gone up to 25 days instead of 22. Part of that is unfortunately due to increased demand and more people in crisis, but also we're subject to delays in poor performance by the postal service, who are probably on strike today, I should imagine, which means that it takes a lot longer for documents to be delivered. So the team are struggling with that as well. But that's something that we're trying to put increased resources into. PL19 is the number, again, affordable homes delivered. This time, so I don't think we're going to meet our target on this one by the end of the year. We're subject to national issues such as supply chain problems and the skill shortage. So some of those houses are likely to be delivered next financial year or early next financial year, but none of them will be lost. And PL27 always looks concerning, which is a number of food safety inspections, but we talked about this a lot at the licensing meeting. And the reality is that team is working under the auspices of the Food Standards Agency COVID recovery plan, which we hadn't anticipated when setting these targets. And we do what we're told, and we're basically on top of that plan, and that's all going as as planned. PL23, I think, is good news. The percentage of planning applications is amber, but almost green. So we're recovering there, which is good news, I think. And I'm not going to go through all the corporate projects because they're quite long. There is a single red mark there, and that's in my portfolio area, which is the e-billing scheme, which we have once again failed to deliver. That got delayed because of the energy bill rebate scheme. And John and I had intended to start rolling that out or start working on that from this year, but now we've had a new energy bill scheme called the energy bill support scheme. We're going to have to start paying out more grants as well, and I think the team are going to be focused on doing that rather than do e-billing. So I think that e-billing is once again going to get punted downstream because I think getting money into hands of people who need it is more important. That's all I've got to say. John, would you like to say anything?
Thank you, Councillor Ficken. No, very little to add. I think a couple of things I'd draw people's attention to as well. So there's some good performance, I think, from the operations team on our waste collection. Looking back before Christmas, that was a very cold period, difficult to get out on patch and to collect that waste. We've still met that target there in terms of our collection activity. I think the crew should be commended for that activity. And secondly, I think another one that I would just picking up on that energy bill support. We concluded that project. It was mandated by government for us to deliver. We completed that in October. We paid out 61,000 households a sum of money, totaling £9.5 million to support them with their energy bills. So again, a significant thing. That was something that was recognised actually within the iCare Awards. That team won one of our internal awards for their performance. So good activities there. But no, nothing further to add, and happy to take questions.
Any questions on this? Yes, Councillor Howe.
Mine's more of a comment than a question. It's regarding PI 26, the good to go. Just to give you a bit of information from the other side of the table. So I'm part of one of those voluntary groups. And we would the way it was sold to us was you'd be the go-to org for that area. Well, as a recognised org, we were already a go-to org for that area. And it would get you into HDC meetings and get you HDC funding. It doesn't give you any recommendation to any other funder. It is literally just for HDC funding. And also, God forbid, one of the good to go orgs ended up going bad. HDC and Hunts Forum are recommending them to people as a good organisation to work with. So what does that do for sort of our reputation if that happens? But yeah, having to do lots and lots of paperwork to be recommended for one funder is quite a lot for a voluntary organisation.
So I acknowledge that, and I've talked to several people in that situation, and the response is always that the benefit you'd get from achieving the accreditation isn't worth the effort that's involved, which means that we should be reconsidering it. But I mean, I think the principle is a sound one. I think other local authorities have done the same thing. I think we should be accrediting our best organisations. I'm sure we can't always help. There should be some sort of renewal process to make sure that we don't, none of them go rogue in the end. But it's clearly not working out at the moment. And we can't force people to do this. We can't create a demand's not there. So I guess that the target of 20 was set during the COVID pandemic when there was a greater impetus and perhaps a lot more enthusiasm. And I think some of those voluntary groups have struggled a bit subsequently and are concentrating on their core delivery rather than filling in paperwork. So, but that's really helpful, and thank you for making a comment.
Are there any other questions?
Just to add one extra point with that, Stephen's absolutely right. In terms of that, I think we do have some lessons to learn around that approach. I think the other thing that I'd reflect as well is that the anticipated effort that we were going to put into supporting organisations going through this process was coming from one team. That team this year has also played the major part in responding to our asylum seekers and the Homes for Ukraine scheme. We've had to make some fairly tough operational priorities about that team, and we spent the time in that space, not necessarily in that area. So a slightly unexpected demand came our way. I think we made the right choice to focus on that area. But absolutely, Councillor Ferguson is right. I think we do need to review that scheme. It's not working at the moment.
Thank you, John. Councillor Corney.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Ferguson. It's good to see that some of those planning targets are turning, green and amber. This is something I've raised before, and it's something that slightly frustrates me. We look at the planning applications that are live. What I'm getting most of in my ward are the backlogs as well as the enforcement issues. You know, in Great Staughton, we have some things outstanding from over 12 months, 18 months. I know you're not the councillor to answer this question for me, but given Councillor Sanderson's in the room, I wondered if you'd mind just giving us an update, or could we start seeing something around that mountain of backlog, certainly in enforcement that we're aware of? Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Corley, was your question about enforcement, planning enforcement? So you'd like to know when we're going to reduce some of the cases? I'll certainly get back to you on that and give you more detail on that. I think just to pick up on Councillor Ferguson's point at PL24, percentage of planning applications processed on target. As I said earlier, before the spring, we didn't actually have any data on that, which we now do. And I think around that time, there are about 750 applications outstanding. The problem was they weren't specified, so we didn't know the difference between enforcement, a live application, discharge of conditions, tree applications, etc. So we're now working on that data. That's going to be produced hopefully very soon. And we're monitoring that, we're going to be starting to monitor that monthly. Latest figures I have are 483 cases are still backlogged, but I'll get some more specific data and come back to you on that. Thank you.
Councillor Corley.
Sorry, an additional point as well, I think that cuts in alongside that enforcement activity. It's about the resources as well that's going into the team and the service. And I think one thing I'd put down as well for the committee to be aware of is that we are putting in additional resource from a programme perspective. So we're out to advert at the moment to bring in resource on an improvement programme within the planning service. So that resource will sit alongside that day-to-day churn that's already happening to tackle enforcement activity. Again, those numbers are half what they were little more than a year or so ago. But we are now putting an additional resource to help with an improvement resource to allow planning officers to deliver on their planning activities, but to have the right support around change and improvement within the service area as well. So that additional injection is happening.
Thank you, John. Councillor Corney, did you have a question? I thought you had, no? Jeez.
We're learning. Yeah, just a few quick comments and observations. My first is on page number 6, KA5 Market Towns Programme. We've got that down as a status green. I put it to you that you might consider that amber was a more reflective. When I look at it, performance is on track, is green, compared to amber, which is performance is within variable, acceptance variable. And I got the impression when we were listening as a scrutiny panel last month that we couldn't claim that it was on track and on target and on time, but we were still confident that it was broadly acceptable and we were kind of going in the right direction. And I wonder if we're just being a little bit optimistic by declaring the Market Towns programme to be green. And I think that's something that I would like you to reflect on. By the same token, in the spirit of charity and generosity, I would certainly agree with you that it would be sort of sensible to look at the climate strategy amber, given the comment that you made earlier, Councillor Ferguson. So what the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away, or vice versa. So if I may make that, just a couple of other points, if I could, Chair, which are all fairly linked together on pages, sort of from page, I get muddled up on these. Am I the only one? So it starts on page 8, footfall in town centres. We don't have a target for that. We make this curious comment that the Huntingdon recorded a 1.3% increase in footfall during the Christmas shopping period compared to 2021. Now, if my memory serves me correct, in 2021 we were in the middle of a pandemic with lockdowns. So I'm just struggling to see how a 1.3% increase from the middle of a pandemic last year would constitute green. Now, I accept that there's no target there, So it's sort of very much a kind of how do I feel about this one? But when I look at that number, and I know you're into your statistics and stuff like that, I'm struggling with the information in front of me to reconcile that 1.3% up from a lockdown could possibly be declared green. And whilst I'm on the same vein, the next one, which is a really important one, proportion of council spend with suppliers in a local area, we haven't confirmed what target we're aiming for here. So we're missing a target there. And then there are other targets, and I won't go into them for the sake of boring everybody, but there are gaps there. And I appreciate, John, that you're going to tell me it's really difficult to get hold of the data. It's very difficult to benchmark it and what have you. But what's the point of having red, amber, greens and having performance indicators if we're not going to try and set ourselves some targets? And I know I'm looking around the room and seeing, I think, positivity around let's be ambitious to get some targets in there. And in the spirit of kind of goodwill to all councillors, this isn't a sort of idea of knocking down people who don't make their targets, but we should put something in there, I think. I've said enough. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you.
I largely agree with that. I think so. Part of the frustration in delivering this report is having to weed through all the things which are meaningless to try and find some interesting things. And so, our ambition is, once we've got the corporate plan out of the way, is to revise these targets and with the view of making them challenging as well. Because you could also observe that there's lots of targets which we overperform on, which is the result of lots of hard work by officers, and we all appreciate that. But actually, we want to challenge people to try and strive to be a bit better as well. So I think once we've got the corporate plan out of the way, we will be revising this report. Lots of the statistics are meaningless. Lots of them are not particularly useful. Some of them are wrong. So I think the whole thing needs a revamp, and I agree with you on all of those points. There's no point in reporting these things if we don't have targets. So we will try and put meaningful targets in place for everything, unless John disagrees with me.
I think that's called a hospital pass. I take the point, Councillor. I think there are some things in here which are difficult to set targets for, absolutely. They're difficult things at the start of the year to anticipate footfall, for example, within our market towns is a really tricky thing to say what we think that number will be by the end of the year. Some of them have been new measures as well, so it's difficult to look back over historical data. But I think the point's well made. The corporate plan should have more targets within it. We can then operationally hold our staff to performance levels and deal with that within our organisation. And Councillor Ferguson is right. He's been very clear with me and the rest of the senior officers that the new corporate plan, which will be coming through, will feature many, many more targets. It will be much more rigorous in terms of what we get set as officers to deliver. So that will come through, absolutely.
Thank you, John. Are there any?
I think I'd be happier if there were more ambers, not really reds, but more ambers. If we were challenging ourselves more, I think it would be a more meaningful exercise. So I completely agree. Thank you.
Councillor Corley.
Just a very brief one. I think while we're going to be looking at adding, looking for targets on the footfall, if we could just make sure Ramsey's added. I had to fight very hard to get a footfall counter for Ramsey, and it's been there for just over a year. So we should have some data to work from moving forwards, but we still need the targets to look at, don't we?
I think I think for residents in those towns, that's really interesting data. Those footfall indicators have been there for a long time. It would be good for us to go to our residents and say, look, we've managed to increase not by 1.3%, by 10% as well. I mean, it's going to be difficult with what's happening with the recession and things, and those figures might go down for a while. But I think having that ambition and be able to track it would be good for all of us. So yes, we will put Ramsey front and centre.
Are there any other questions on that? Can I just actually revisit one that you actually mentioned, was about food inspections, and effectively when I read that, and obviously you've addressed the whole issue, and saying obviously it's food standards that have actually got the challenge for you. But I noticed on the comment that you've actually been short of staff. Is it a general staff shortage issue as well? Number of programme food safeties. John.
Right. This is on the operational side of the fence, so I can talk about where we are with the staffing. So there has been a long-term staffing absence within that team. It's been resolved. That individual now has left the council, so we'll be recruiting to replace. So that's one aspect. We are not, though, overall short-staffed in that team. We've been able to use overtime. We've been able to rededicate time from within the team to try to get the performance back up. Stephen's point's right, though. The targets from the Food Standard Agency really are part of their COVID recovery programme, that they are unrealistic for us to deliver within the course of this year. What the team has done, though, which I think is the right thing, is to use a risk-based approach to this. So effectively what are set are risk ratings around each of the food locations. Those that are at the highest risk are the ones that we are making sure that we visit. So those ones do get boots on the ground, people going around making sure that they're doing exactly what they should. Those which are less risky, those which have performed well traditionally in the past, where we got reasonable grounds to assume they will continue to operate that way. They're good businesses that have been in this district for a long time, are not getting the same level of assessment as it stands this year. We'll go back to that over the course of next year. But broadly, where we are in terms of staffing, to answer your question, is we are okay within that service area.
Are we actually doing anything then about going back to the Food Standards Agency saying these targets are just unacceptable? Because it's meaningless if we've actually got a target we know we can't achieve.
We have fed that back, like many local authorities. It's not made much difference.
Councillor Ferguson.
So COVID is often used as an excuse, but it's worth noting for the food industry, it completely changed the whole profile of the industry. Lots of restaurants that were restaurants were offering takeaways. Lots of new businesses opened up, and so just catching up on that backlog has taken a while. But like John said, they're doing it on a risk basis, so that those businesses that offered the highest risk to our residents, especially vulnerable residents, are the ones that have been tackled first. And so I think that the condition of food safety in the district is safe.
Thank you. Sorry, John, did you want to say anything? Councillor Howell's just got to say.
I just wanted to check, do I need to declare an interest? Because we were a recognised org for the comment I made earlier, but we are not a good to go. We haven't applied for it. So
I was going to say, if you declare the interest, then I can record it, so we've got it.
Thank you for that. Keep us all on the straight and narrow. Are there any other questions on this item? Okay, thank you. Oh, Councillor Ferguson.
Can I just thank the hard work of all the officers who gave us so many greens as well? I think lots of hard work goes into this, and we need to appreciate that. Thank you.
I think we would all endorse that. Thank you very much. Thanks. Okay, so item 8, review of representation on outside bodies.
So one of the working groups from this panel has looked at the review of representatives on outside bodies and internal drainage boards. Obviously, you have the report here in the agenda pack to have a look at. The panel did interview quite a few different members from different boards, also councillors, to come up with this. And I think that it's quite a sensible approach and sort of putting some structure back in place. Without wanting to go through all of the report, are there any questions, or would you like a little bit further information on that? Councillor Gardiner, did you want to say anything?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, firstly, I would like to thank all the members on that particular panel, Councillor Howe, Councillor Corley and Councillor Corney. I think it worked well, and I think the recommendations that you can see there are important ones, whereby we have a proper reporting process for all councillors that attend outside bodies, so that they know, they report back to the council, and the relevant officers take ownership of those particular panels, and there is a direct relationship between the councillor, the council and the board, so that then there's a proper reporting process. So they're the main things, and as we've said, we think they should remain non-political, and that the person that is in post is a ward member, providing they've got the experience to cater for that particular role, and that they have also got the time to do that role, because some roles are daytime meetings and they are quite onerous if you're doing all of them. So, the councillor or whoever's going to be approached to do the job needs to be aware. And of course, I would like also to thank Councillor Comboy for her comments and input into that process.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Oh, it would be.
It would be me.
I just wanted to follow on from a colleague's comments there. I endorse this. I think this is a great piece of work. I think from somebody that spent the first year of their council life at HTC, sat on a committee very uneasily without going into too much detail. But towards the end of that first year, I actually spoke to Democratic Services and aired my concerns, only to be told that it was nothing to do with HTC anymore. And I'd been there for a year and I didn't need to be. And I was told after telling them what was going on, I was told to distance myself fairly quickly. So I think this is a very welcome piece of work, and look forward to seeing it come into fruition.
Thank you for your comments. That's helpful. Thank you. Are there any other comments on this item? Okay. I'm assuming we don't have to vote on this one.
No, that's good.
No, that's fine. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so we're actually, goodness, on to item 9. Executive Councillor for Leisure and Waste. Thank you.
So, as members are aware, you requested at a previous meeting that Councillor Taylor, the Executive Councillor for Leisure, Waste and Street Scene, attend this meeting to discuss the financials behind the One Leisure Fees and Charges report, which went through the Overview and Scrutiny panel in November, and also attending is Greg Holland, who's the Interim Head of Leisure as well. We did ask for questions to be submitted in advance, and Councillor Corley very kindly did send some through. So perhaps if we could start with those, because I know obviously we've been able to share those with the councillor and the officer in advance. So perhaps Councillor Corley, we could ask for you to start with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Councillor Taylor, for coming along. You've hopefully seen my questions and I'll be able to get some idea from you. But the questions were for the rest of you. I wanted to understand the financial modelling that had been used to determine the pricing options, and understanding the assumptions and membership numbers that had been used in that modelling. Because obviously it went to the other panel. I watched it on the live stream that night, and it was very much a presentation of what was going to happen. I was surprised that my colleagues didn't want to understand a bit more, so I want to understand a bit more. So that's the first question. You want to take that one first?
Yep. Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. The financial modelling was based upon the last year of the full operation, that was pre-COVID. This was 2019 to 2020. The financial model is based on the total revenue that One Leisure received across the outlined price points. If you've got the November's agenda, that would have been on Appendix 1. That was been during 2019 and 2020. We then added what we call, it's called a price change, and this creates a percent increase. It's all like done on a spreadsheet. This was applied across all the revenue lines. It was based upon the customer's behaviour, not changing, which is outlined in the original report. That was section 5. And if you'd read it, that
the key impacts and the risks. I think the last point, importantly, is it's the same financial modelling used in previous price increases across the One Leisure facility. It's nothing different that we've used before. So within the previous administration, when the price increases have been done, it's exactly the same modelling.
Yes, Councillor Corner.
Thank you. That's not quite what I was asking, because I assumed, you sat with all the prices and decided a percentage uplift. I suppose what I was expecting maybe was that having decided to increase prices by X percent, you'd then sort of model what that might do in terms of uptake, downturn, all that sort of stuff, which I suspect you have. So that maybe.
So if I can take that one. So it's interlinked, I think, across all of the questions that you posed, because a lot of them are around the membership revenue. So Councillor Taylor is absolutely correct that within Appendix 1 there was a spreadsheet and we added a monetary value. So we took the full year of operation pre-COVID in 2019 to 2020, and we put a monetary value, whether that be 50p a pound or £2 onto different pricing tariffs, and that provided a percentage change. Overall, across all pricing, it was 8.7% as outlined in the report. Some were 11%, some were 5%, and on average it was an 8.7%. But to answer your question, we have reviewed obviously attendances and obviously financial information, which I can update you in the preceding questions. But what we have done, importantly, is use the same model that has been used in previous years within One Leisure pricing. So what we're doing is nothing different to what we've done in previous years. We're adopting the same modelling and output, but simply using the information at hand from previous years.
So without labouring the point, I totally get all of that. I suppose the question I'm asking is, so you did that exercise, you've worked out your prices. Was there any thought then, right, given these prices and given what we know about our customers, what might that do to our customer behaviour before the decision was made? Because I'm used to in the business world, if we're going to model something, we'll say, here's what we're going to do. Now, what will that do to our customers? What might that do to footfall? Or what might that do? So we've got a rough idea of where we think that's going to go, so that if it goes that way, then great, we got it right. If it doesn't go that way, why didn't it go that way, and what do we need to change?
Yeah, so if I'll take that one. So in terms of the Platinum membership, which is our highest yield membership of £40 a month, we reviewed that as an example. So we know that there's price sensitivity across all of the leisure centres. We know that we've got a lot more independent gym operators across the district than we had pre-COVID. So as an example, within the report, we believed that there would be too much pressure on increasing that from £40 and above. We didn't change the price point for that, but what we did do is we changed the price point of the joint membership from £33 a month to £36 a month, because we knew that whilst the Platinum was very popular, we didn't want to risk that downturn in membership. But what we did believe we had an opportunity to do, based on our competitors, was increase the joint membership, because we knew there was growth there. Thank you.
Was there another question? Right.
So and this is, you're right, these are all related questions, and it sounds like you've done this, but it'd be good to get a bit more detail. So understanding what marketplace benchmarking, because again, you can sit and say everything goes up 5% or 10%, but you've obviously had a look at, you're in a competitive market here. You're probably the only part of our organisation potentially that's in that very direct competitive market. What sort of benchmarking exercise was carried out, if any?
So this is threefold, the answer. Effectively, our senior leadership team within One Leisure completed a really robust local competitive analysis, understanding the values that they charge for different types of membership, which informed our decision making around the price increases that we applied. But twofold to that, and independently, we knew that one of our main business priorities was the growth of our membership direct debits, because we know that drives the majority of our revenue across One Leisure. So fundamentally what we did, we took some independent research through an industry acknowledged research company, and they identified that there was a latent demand across our leisure centres for growth of about 1,500. We know, based upon the facts and our figures, that we've lost 1,400 members from pre-pandemic to current. So there's no coincidence there that there's a latent demand and a growth opportunity. What we will struggle with is the growth in competition. We know there's a pure gym coming in St Ives very imminently. We know there's a gym group in Huntingdon and Anytime Fitness, which has affected our performance post-COVID to pre-COVID. And then thirdly, we had two separate meetings with UK Active, the trade industry body. They completed an industry-wide price sensitivity analysis based upon all leisure operators, and the feedback from all leisure operators is that based upon the increased costs and utility costs, that they had all introduced price increases based upon those sort of complex issues of increased cost. So it's threefold.
So, all right, Chair, if I just add, within the report in November, item 8, it does actually say that, what the actual local competitors were, like the Gym Group, Sports Direct, Anytime Fitness, Snap Fitness, even the local one like Why Boston Spa, which is near One Leisure at St Neots. So they were all looked at very thoroughly.
Are there any other questions? Councillors?
Just bother to ask a question. That's really useful. Thank you. That's reassured me, and that's really helpful. Thank you. And now my last part was, and I know it's early days. This year, the charges only went through the end of the year. Just yesterday. So, okay, so that was the first one. So it's very early days. It'd just be useful if you are, and you may not be able to share with us what has happened. Has it gone the way you wanted? Is it still too early to tell? And also the final part was, is there a break-even point at member numbers? So if you've done that modelling and you know that there's a certain level of below which you really don't want the membership to drop, what is that?
So question 3 I've marked it down as, which is around early days. So what I can report in the first month, we implemented and brought in an independent consultant to set up a sales management system and process. We were very reactive within One Leisure, where we relied on walk-ins to come into the centre to turn them into sales. What this does is a manual sales system whereby all of our staff have been trained in December. That new system has been implemented whereby we will actually now go and contact our cancellations and win them back to increase our membership base. We will make telephone calls to former members, pay-as-you-go members as well, to try and get them onto memberships. But in terms of sales, pure direct debit sales in January, we actually achieved 589 direct debit sales in this year versus 459 last year and 530 in January 2020. So we've actually surpassed the last 2 years' level of sales. So I think actually that's with increased competition versus the previous 2 years. So I think on a positive note, that's really important. In terms of when I say overall sales, that's membership annual payment. So someone might pay up front for 12 months versus a direct debit. We sold 638 in January. And we only sold 531 last year. So that's positive news in the main. Whilst January of the previous year in 2020 and 2019 were higher, a lot of that was to do with the renewals of the membership annuals. So we were lower in membership annuals this year versus those 2 previous years because of the closures that we saw in the pandemic. It's actually staggered and lengthened the renewal process of the month of the renewal out. So we haven't seen them this month, but we will see them later on in the year, probably around the summertime, because we've had to take into account all of the months of closure through that period. So that's obviously been very beneficial. And then to come on to question 4, as I've got it, about break-even point, I alluded earlier to 1,400 members that we know we haven't got now versus pre-pandemic. That is our main aim, to get back to that level of 1,400. But if you look at the break-even point of view, I reported in the previous report that One Leisure will make a financial loss, budgeted financial loss next year of 274,000 because of the increase in national minimum wages. That's actually increased to 355. So if we take that number as a profit and loss number, whilst our aim is 1,400 members, with increased competition, that is going to be extremely difficult. But a break-even point of view is really 1,000 members. We need to attract 1,000 more members. So year on year versus last year to this year, we've actually taken in about 560 members with increased competition, no dedicated sales membership management system. So I'm very confident that we can hit that 1,000 members to get to that bottom line position. So that's about £350,000 worth of membership.
Thank you. Excellent, thank you. That's been really helpful and most instructive. I'm confident with your leadership that we're going to get there. Then I mean, I'm not just blowing smoke. I think it sounds like you know what you're doing. It sounds like there's a real plan there. So thank you for filling us in on that. Thank you.
Councillor Gray. Oh, sorry. Councillor Gray. Oh.
Great. Thank you very much. And I didn't submit my question in advance, but then that's partly because it's kind of linked to something you've just said, Greg. So I want to go back to the report in November, because one of the reasons why we asked you to come here, Councillor Taylor, is we were concerned there's quite a lot of financial data in here, which affects the budget, affects a whole load of aspects. So whilst all the social stuff and the good stuff that's happening at One Leisure rightly, I think, belongs in the other panel, I think we felt that issues around the impact on budget and how it was being accounted and looked at might sit comfortably here. So that's why we asked you to come here, and I'll leave how it goes up in the future. So I'm going to go back to the pact. And Greg, you've just mentioned this number, 10.1, unless a price increase is implemented, One Leisure will operate at a £274,000 deficit in 23-24. So that's quite helpful because we've just looked at the budget for 23 and 24, and thereafter a £300,000 deficit thereafter. So unless we increase the prices, we're going to be minus 275. So the decision was taken to increase the prices, which basically put another 194,000 into the pot. Now, by my maths, that means that that number should have fallen to minus 80. Now, I've heard you talk about the minimum wage and the pressure that that's putting on there, which I think I saw as being another 80 odd thousand kind of rushing through the system. So I can get you back up to 160 if you want, but the numbers that we've just looked at are greater than that when we look at the budget. And if I think about the active lifestyles obviously sits in there and slightly confuses things, but it's a very stable line throughout the whole thing. And does that mean that actually things have slightly deteriorated since you issued the report in November compared to where we're budgeting as at presumably pretty much 2 or 3 weeks ago when Karen kind of closed everything down?
I think I can fairly confidently say that the increase that I've just mentioned has been included within the 23-24 budget for next year. What we have got is a medium-term financial plan that we expect to enact through the course of 23-24. You've mentioned that it's increased to 355,000 and it only accounts for 194, the price increase, but there are other measures that One Leisure are working on and will work on through 23-24 to minimise that and get back to break, or as near to break even, to a surplus position as possible.
So could I just ask a supplementary question? And this is just something to take away in line with the conversation I made earlier. When I look at the budget, so this is the budget paper that's just gone through, you're currently spending, or you're anticipating on spending in 2023-24, 3.34 million on your staff. The following year, you're going to spend 3.4 million. So that's another 100,000. And then the year after that, less than 100,000 increase, and the year after that, less than 100,000 increase again. And I'm thinking on 3.3 million a year, the idea that we're going to be paying staff an extra £100,000 a year across the life cycle of that budget looks to me to be, well, I mean, explain it to me, because it looks like you're going to have less staff. that's the implication that I would get, because I can't believe that if you've got minimum wage pressures, which you outlined correctly, you're going to get away with those kind of percentage increases in a salary bill. So these are the kind of things, when I'm looking at it, I just feel we've got to kind of kick those tires as a panel, and I'm willing to be corrected, Chair, but I look at that and think either we're going to diminish activity, or maybe Greg, you can explain it.
I think it's definitely a point to take away and note, and we can review that. I think the other point within that medium financial term plan that we've mentioned, we will be conducting a root and branch review of staffing across One Leisure. We know we trade at a staff to income ratio of about 60% traditionally across leisure centres. We trade at about 50 to 55%. So that's why we want to undertake that review between April and June this year. And it's part of the update presentation we'll give to Overview and Scrutiny Committee tomorrow, which I'm happy to share with you, which will hopefully give you a sense of confidence across One Leisure, which covers One Leisure and active lifestyles.
Yeah, and I would close by saying, in line with Councillor Corley, we do wish you all the very best. We've personally poured an awful lot of time and money into One Leisure. We're very proud of the brand and proud of its place within our communities. We want it to succeed, and so our line of questioning here is not in any way designed to sort of criticise you or indeed you, Councillor Taylor. We want to make sure that we're, fighting fit and ready to rock and roll. If that's not mixing my metaphors too much.
Sorry, Councillor Taylor, all right, Councillor Corley.
Thank you, Chair. Having listened to all of that and obviously understanding the importance of One Leisure in terms of the impact it has on the budget, the amount of money that we have invested and continue to invest in that service, would I be out of order to suggest that perhaps it becomes a line on this panel's agenda more so than perhaps the other panel's agenda, given that the biggest issue here will be the money ultimately?
I think you make a good point in terms of the financial, because as far as I remember, when we've actually had previous, it's a line already on some of the performance reports, because we've actually discussed it before. I'll need to take that away just to make sure that we see what we can do and actually bring it back to the committee, and we'll clarify that. But I take your point. There's just one question I actually wanted to ask, because I'm a geek actually about these things. Your price sensitivity analysis really intrigued me. I used to do this type of stuff. And can you just very, very briefly tell me how you did your price sensitivity analysis? I assume, did you segment it?
Yes, we in Appendix 1, all of our prices were broken down through the different segments: indoor activities, outdoor activities, swimming, and memberships, and so on and so forth. It was based upon obviously the competitor analysis and the UK active information that we gave. The pricing sensitivity was done across the industry, the UK leisure industry, by UK Active, and it was shared in confidence with us in terms of how other operators had tested the market and were willing to increase, decrease pricing and hold pricing. So that's the main element that we reviewed as well, in line with our own competitor analysis.
Am I good? I just wanted to get the last final word in, that was all. Everyone finished? Right. No, I do appreciate you, invited us along and scrutinising us. That's what you're here for. And I totally agree with you. When I got this position as portfolio holder of leisure, I'm excited. It's one of my passions. I've always supported our One Leisure industry previously when I was a councillor many years ago. And I really, really want to see this work. And it's not unusual for price increases in leisure industry. Many of the leisure industries do it. They have to do it. They have to be sustainable. especially in the current climate with, fuel increases, it's something we're having to do. But I really do appreciate you scrutinising us, and, and we need to know that you understand what's happening with this, One Leisure, with our areas in One Leisure. And as Greg mentioned as well, I'm back here tomorrow with Greg and with Joe and Martin. Is it Martin? And we're going to present with customer and partnership presentation on all three: Burgess Hall, One Leisure, and Active Lifestyle. I would have liked you all to come along as well, but what we'll do is, as Greg said, we will present the slides after so you can all look at them. And absolutely, if you want clarification on anything, please do contact me.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor and Greg. I think that's been really helpful. And with clarification on the points, and thank you very much for your time. It's been, I'm sure we all appreciate the time. Thank you. Finally, okay, item 10.
So the overview and scrutiny work programme, obviously the current work programme is in there. As you will note, the item on drainage boards and representations on outside bodies is there. Obviously that will be going to Cabinet next week. We'll be leaving it on there, as we will be regularly reviewing how that update is going, so that working group will still meet occasionally to make sure that the recommendations within the report, assuming that they're accepted by Cabinet, are then monitored and actioned, so that group will still stay on there for a while. And then obviously there's the bits of information which relate to the other panel. So sort of following on from that, are there any items that members would like to add into the work programme, or any comments on that? So Councillor Gray, what's that?
Councillor Corney.
I was going to arm wrestling for it. Just going, just going back to the task and finish groups that we've already, we've gone through. I mean, some time ago we went through the markets themselves. That never really went anywhere. We sort of got to a point, so far, how to how we can encourage our markets. We've talked a bit tonight about footfall measures and targets. That could be a good baseline for us to sort of look at this, see the markets, and then following on as well from the market towns. There's a lot of work going on from the market towns across the district. Is there something we can use? Looking at footfall as a target and encouraging obviously more use of the town centres. Growth.
So certainly I can add that on as a line and sort of do some background work as to see how that can come to the panel, so that we can have that potentially as a line. So you'll have to leave that one with me to sort of do a bit of digging on, but that can be added on.
In the same vein, I think there are two subjects that have cropped up this evening, and frankly, one of them, as has been alluded to by my fellow councillors, crops up in my councillors' inbox all the time, where I think we would benefit from more management information, and they are the item that we've just talked about, One Leisure, where I think it would be great to see, is there a simple MI dashboard that could be put together that could instruct all of us as to how One Leisure is performing, both in terms of financial but qualitative and quantitative ways. And I think it would be really interesting for a work party to see how easy that was. I know already there'll be a lot of work going on internally, which I'm sure is being shared around the department. But I tend to find that when we have these conversations at scrutiny panel meetings and what have you, it all becomes a little bit ad hoc. A few numbers are kind of dropped in. It's difficult to kind of put them into context. That leads me on to the next item, which is planning, where I think exactly the same thing we could put together. So, for example, the issue of at the moment we're reporting around the issue of how many live applications have we met within the 8-week target. There's no data out there that I can see about the aged debt, if you want to call it that way, of applications that have been in the system for months and in some cases years. And I think we need to recognise that whether it's on the application side or whether it's on the enforcement side, this is a big concern to our residents. As I said, I've spent more time in the last 18 to 24 months. So this is not a coalition versus conservative kind of comment. It straddles both administrations. But I've spent more time dealing with planning issues and planning complaints than I have ever done as a councillor in 18 years. And I don't think that's good enough. I'm not here to knock the chief planning officer, the executive councillor, the managing director, or anybody else. But I think we need to, I have to say that I don't feel that I understand what the issue is. And I don't know that I can put my hand on my heart and say that we're going in the right direction. And so I feel, again, a management information dashboard would be a really interesting thing to explore, because then we have a single source of truth sitting in front of us that we can all understand and that we can all interpret. And I think that they would be a good addition to the, an improvement perhaps on some of the performance data that we're getting at this point in time. So that's my two suggestions, maybe one project.
I can say, if you're happy to leave that with me to investigate and sort of have some relevant conversations, and I can come back to you on that one.
Is that it? Are we finished on that? Thank you very much for your time, as ever, and comments. Very useful. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.